by an American lifeboat. In June 1963, the 9th International Lifeboat Conference took place in Edinburgh. From the earliest days of these conferences, the RNLI, the acknowledged leader of the world in lifeboat design, has acted as the central secretariat. A great honor this, and we've been only too pleased to pass on our knowledge and experience to any who ask for it. For instance, recently, 2 52-foot Barnett lifeboats were completed for service in Italy. In Portugal, they are building a 37-foot Oakley lifeboat to the British design. At Edinburgh, the United States Coast Guard delegation read a paper on their new 44-foot lifeboat. They also showed a film. This is something of what the delegates from 17 nations saw. Having seen the film, heard the paper, and inspected a model, the RNLI thought there might be a place for a boat such as this in their fleet. And so, a small expert delegation was sent by the institution to America to investigate in detail. Every facility was granted, every question answered. They saw much to impress them. Building techniques and trials. The U.S. Coast Guard Service could not have been more helpful. As a result of long and thorough evaluation, it was decided on return to buy a boat for further trials, such as these, in our own home waters. The advantage? The saving to the RNLI of thousands of pounds in research and development on a new type, thanks to the U.S. Coast Guard generosity. So, at Whitsun 1964, she arrived in England to start her trials from Littlehampton. The object of the trials? To decide whether boats of this type would be suitable for service round our coast. How does she differ from ours? She's built of steel. A very important point this. Craftsmen in wood are getting more and more scarce. Her hull plating is of Corten steel, the decks of mild steel. Engines. 2 diesel engines, each produce 200 horsepower. Her speed, about 15 knots. "44 foot, 10.5 inches overall length, the lifeboat has a beam of 12 foot 8 inches, a draft of 3 foot 2.5 inches, and a displacement of 15.8 tons. At 10 knots, she can travel 290 miles, at full speed, 160 miles. The lifeboat has now carried out trials round the coast of Britain and Ireland, steaming nearly 5,000 miles. So much for the details. Now let Staff Coxswain Hills, who was in charge of the boat during the trials, tell you what he thinks of her.
Well, I was brought in to run the trials for this boat with a very experienced crew. And I set out with the intention that this boat should build up my confidence. And our first stern test came on the west coast of Ireland in a northwesterly gale force 9 with a heavy sea. On that day we started out feeling very much like guinea pigs. Everyone was quiet, no joking. And after an hour or two, people began to return to their normal cheeriness. And at the end of that day, a very experienced crewman came and said, "Well, Coxswain, if you want me for a ruddy hurricane, I'm with you." And that is the measure of the confidence we built in this boat.
And now, one of the RNLI's most experienced district inspectors, Commander Leslie Hill.
I was most impressed when I went out in this boat. At first, I didn't know how she would behave at all. And it wasn't until we really got out into dirty weather I felt the full measure of what this boat was capable of. She's quite incredible. The worse the weather, the more she seems to like it. And we had quite an experience going over the bar at Sperry, where there's a very heavy sea running, and the staff coxswain handled that boat absolutely superbly. And we went into this broken water, and our own boats had been extremely wet and uncomfortable, and this one behaved as if she was in a calm lake almost. And we turned beam on into this, she behaved extremely well, and then when I took over going across the bay, we had extremely good conditions to judge her in. A sea hit me when I was at the wheel, and she just moved sideways about 15 feet with no undue effect at all. And generally, the crews who came out with me during that period were most impressed. And the worse the weather, the more they appreciated the boat.
If the institution decides to build more of these boats, they will of course be built here in this country. Our American Coast Guard friends have given us every facility to do this. And she should prove a useful addition to the lifeboat fleet.